Okay, welcome back. We are ACI Course 7. This is Class 6 already, March 7th, 2025. I would like to remind us that in the United States, at least daylight savings time starts on Sunday. I don't know if the rest of the world does that, but Arizona does not change. So whatever, you need to adjust your time for class on Monday morning, according to daylight savings time that Arizona doesn't change. And I like have an impairment. I can't tell you what happens, but we become the same as California until October, if that helps. Okay, so let's gather our minds here as we usually do. Please bring your attention to your breath until you hear from me again. Now bring to mind that being who for you is a manifestation of ultimate love, ultimate compassion, ultimate wisdom. And see them there with you. They are gazing at you with their unconditional love for you, smiling at you with their holy great compassion, their wisdom radiating from them, that beautiful golden glow encompassing you in its light. And then we hear them say, bring to mind someone you know who's hurting in some way. Feel how much you would like to be able to help them. Recognize how the worldly ways we try fall short. How wonderful it will be when we can also help them in some deep and ultimate way, a way through which they will go on to stop their distress forever. Deep down, we know this is possible. Deep down, we know this is what we're meant to do. And so we turn our mind back to our precious holy being. We know that they know what we need to know, what we need to learn yet, what we need to do yet to become one who can help this other in this deep and ultimate way. And so we ask them, please teach us that. And they are so happy that we've asked. Of course, they agree. Our gratitude arises. We want to offer them something exquisite. And so we think of the perfect world they are teaching us how to create. We imagine we can hold it in our hands and we offer it to them, following it with our promise to practice what they teach us, using our refuge prayer to make our promise. Here is the great earth, filled with fragrant incense and covered with a blanket of flowers. The great mountain, 4 lands, wearing the jewel of the sun and the moon. In my mind, I make them the paradise of a Buddha and offer it all to you. By this deed, may every living being experience the pure world. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest community, through the merit that I do in sharing this class and the rest. May we reach Buddhahood for the sake of every living being. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest community, through the merit that I do in sharing this class and the rest. May we reach Buddhahood for the sake of every living being. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest community, through the merit that I do in sharing this class and the rest. May all beings reach their total awakening for the benefit of every single other. Right. Last class, we learned the second 9 of the 18 root bodhisattva downfalls. Those deeds that if we do them, we fall down, meaning plant the seeds to, go to a lesser realm. But more importantly, we've just fallen down in our promise, our wish to become a being who's helping others stop their suffering. So, and again, I encourage you, when you review those vows, you say, I vow to avoid, so that you're planting in your mind the avoidance, not the root downfall of praising myself and criticizing other. I don't know. I just still hear that as something I'm supposed to do, not do. Downfall to me isn't enough to imprint in my mind, I'm going to avoid this. So I always say them, I will avoid the downfall of. So the number 10 through 18. I will avoid destroying towns and such. I will avoid teaching emptiness to a person not yet mentally prepared. I will avoid causing a person to turn back from total enlightenment. I will avoid causing a person to give up their morality of freedom. I will avoid holding that a person cannot eliminate desire and the rest by following the way of the listener. Number 15, I will avoid professing the complete opposite. I will avoid accepting what belongs to the 3 jewels when someone presents it to me. I will avoid rejecting the practice of quietude and giving the possessions of meditators to those who practice recitation. And number 18, I will avoid discarding my wish for enlightenment. So your quiz asked, what's the result which must occur for the 11th root downfall to occur? So the 11th root downfall is the one that says, I will avoid teaching emptiness to someone not yet mentally prepared. And there was that specific set of circumstances that would qualify for this vow to be damaged or broken. And that one's broken by way of a result that seems to happen. So the result is that because of our emptiness teaching, someone who was already a Mahayana practitioner gets scared. And as a result, they give up the Mahayana and they shift their focus to Hinayana or something else, even. It's when they make this choice to leave the Mahayana that our vow gets broken. It brings up a lot of questions in my mind. It's like, well, then I would have to know it, wouldn't I? And anyway, then your quiz asked, how is it that the 13th root downfall is committed? So the 13th is causing a person to give up their morality of freedom. And that one says, you're right, you're talking, I don't know, so you know someone who's keeping their pratimoksha vows behavior well. And you encourage them to come up to the Mahayana or maybe even Diamond Way. And you explain to them that once they're in Mahayana, they don't need their lower vows. And it's like, I can't imagine that happening. But right, if we weren't so well trained, it could happen. And that's the point of studying these vows and knowing them well, that it's fine to get to the point where we go, man, I'm not ever going to do that. Although be careful, right? When we say, man, I'm not ever going to do that. Sometimes it's a challenge, right, to our karmic seeds, and they go, yeah, let's see. So giving this wrong impression that once you're Mahayana, you don't need to focus, still focus on your individual freedom vows. Of course, it's so incorrect that it damages our goodness, as we will see. Then your quiz asks, the 18th and one other vow are particularly serious and don't require those more four mentally afflicted states of mind called the four change to be present. Which vow is the other vow? And describe it. So when they talk about the two vows, they mean losing the wish, number 18, meaning I give up. They're not worth it. That kind of I give up. And then number 9 is holding the wrong view. So classically, we would have to know the truth of karma and past and future lives already, which would be why we would even be in a position of having our vows. And then for whatever circumstance builds up, we go back and we think through that logic and we decide, I don't know what I was thinking. You know, past and future lives, that's not possible. Karma, that's not possible. It's not true that my behavior brings consequences. And it's kind of worth thinking about that deeper, because it sounds so obviously ridiculous, and yet it must happen because it's here, right? In how we damage our bodhisattva vows, how we damage our whole spiritual path. And it would come out of seeds ripening just like anything else. But we could imagine where things get so hard in life that this ability to hold the understanding that what I see myself do now doesn't ripen into the immediate next thing. It takes time, right? We get swayed by the gap. And if in the gap things are just getting worse and worse and worse and worse, it would be harder and harder and harder to hold our worldview. And then if we get overwhelmed, it could trigger this whole thought process that reevaluates and decides, man, that stuff can't be true. When we don't believe that our actions have consequences, morality makes no sense at all. And that's this breaking of number 9, is coming to that. We would call it a new conclusion, but your state of mind wouldn't be, this is my new conclusion. Your state of mind would be, this is the conclusion. Now, and it's that rejection of our deeds having consequences that breaks this 9th vow. Those two, losing the wish and the coming to this new conclusion, they don't require these 4 chains that we're going to be talking about very soon. As in now, next. But we're still building up to them. So in the wording of our 18 root bodhisattva vows, we've seen that the vowed behavior is really more specific than the words show us. And, they give us the short version of them so that we can memorize them and rattle them off, so we can keep them in mind. But it's necessary to understand the meaning of each of those vows so that we can be aware of like our things we're doing, things we're planning to do, to make sure that they fit with our new vowed behavior, which, I don't know, I hope you're recognizing that it's not like brand new behavior that you're needing to learn. Like all of these things are mostly things we already do. And now we're wanting to be more specific in our choosing to do or not do certain interactions with people. And again, our tradition insists that we know our bodhisattva vows and the ramifications of damaging them and how we damage them and how we fix them before we actually decide to declare ourselves as wanting vows and then getting vows. We don't need to have the vows to use these behaviors as guidelines for our lives. As soon as we know them, we are welcome to use them. There's that added advantage, of course, of growing the goodness of having the vow to do or not do those behaviors. It's possible that a person could receive an initiation and in those initiations, the highest yoga tantra, you'll always receive your bodhisattva vows, but you may or may not know it. And then, right, and then how do you really keep them if you don't even know you got them? And I think technically they would say you just really were getting the seeds for them and the seeds for the initiation and the blessings. of them. But, Geshe-la was pointing out in this class, like he was talking to people that had done different initiations in different circumstances without this kind of training before they went into it. And he was making the point that it's very possible that we could have had our bodhisattva vows and not known what they were, and so not been able to guard our behavior well, and then we wouldn't even know whether we had broken them or not. So again, he was just encouraging us to study this course well and not ask to take your bodhisattva vows until you feel strongly, okay, I understand this well enough, right? We're not going to understand it perfectly, but understand it well enough. And my Munsem, my wish to reach total enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings, all sentient beings, I feel it strong enough that I will use it to help me check my behavior, follow these guidelines, and see how my own behavior gets to change, right? To help me grow myself along the path. However, to actually break those bodhisattva vows, whether you really know them or not, requires these 4 states of mind in your mind as you're planning your deed, doing your deed, thinking about your deed afterwards, in order to actually break the vow. So back to having received them and not really knowing them, but then the likelihood of not having all 4 of these states of mind is high also. Yeah, so maybe, I don't know. So anyway, so to break any one of these 18 root vows, it does take a very specific condition with specific states of mind. It's not something that's like I casually broke my bodhisattva vows. So, but it does then require that we have an increased level of mindfulness over our behavior choices. So the reason they go into this is that the results of breaking a root bodhisattva vow is so serious. So now to break means to fully break. We can damage, but and damages will, right, it makes life harder, but damage is not a full break. Damage gives us a negative karmic seed planted that will come back as an unpleasant situation. We're talking about a full-on break. So if we break a root downfall, there are 3 serious results. Number 1 is because of breaking a root bodhisattva downfall, we cannot reach the first bodhisattva bhumi in this lifetime. So what does that really mean? Reaching first bodhisattva bhumi means that we have grown our bodhicitta in our heart, our wishing bodhicitta, and we've planted the goodness of study, contemplation, meditation, service. We've moved along our second path, a path of preparation, reached the experience of Chuchok, direct experience of the seed ripening into the object, and then run and jumped on our meditation cushion, and because of our hour a day of meditation, we're able to sustain that deep meditation in which we can turn our focus of concentration onto the true nature of that object and the me experiencing that object, and we go into the direct perception of ultimate reality. With a mind imbued with bodhicitta, we always hear. And then when we come out of that, I mean, Geshe-la was saying last night, you know, the first 15 milliseconds of your path of seeing, your own path of seeing, and then, right, in the next millisecond, you're still in that, but you're already on your first bodhisattva bhumi. But let's just say, when you come out of your meditation, you are now on your path of habituation. And because you went into that experience with the mind imbued with bodhisattva, with bodhicitta, when you come out, you're on your first bodhisattva bhumi, right? The bhumi of perfect happiness. And your task then is to get used to what you've learned, what you now know about yourself and others, by focusing on your giving, which means chipping away at our possessiveness and stinginess, right? And our me first. And so in order to see emptiness, well, so seeing emptiness directly is the doorway to our first bodhisattva bhumi, and then that means we're on the conveyor belt to our total enlightenment. So the mind imbued with bodhicitta is what makes the conveyor belt that we come out on be the one to total enlightenment. A mind imbued with, I want to reach nirvana, puts us on the conveyor belt to nirvana, right? So that mind going into our direct perception of emptiness is important to influence us coming out of the direct perception of emptiness. But that said, the direct perception of emptiness is the key to stepping onto that conveyor belt. And that experience, because it's so positively influencing of ourselves and our world, it can only be a ripening result of great virtue, right? Does that make sense? Our direct perception of emptiness is going to be a ripening result like any other experience. And it takes a really high amount of high goodness in order to grow those seeds into that extraordinary experience. That's what all of our vowed behaviors are about, growing that goodness that's big enough to lead to that experience and then others beyond it. So anything that blocks us from being able to grow, to plant and grow those seeds that could ripen as our direct perception of emptiness would be serious blockers. So this first serious result of breaking a bodhisattva vow is that the negativity of that, like, blocks our ability to see emptiness directly with bodhicitta in our heart. We could still have bodhicitta. Of course, we're going to still, well, maybe not, of course. We can still have bodhicitta in our mind. We can still be meditating, and we can still want to see emptiness directly, but a broken vow is like a big black cloud and prevents us from having that experience. The second result of breaking a vow is the explanation for why it's a big black cloud. So any virtue that we had already accumulated that could get us to that direct perception of emptiness gets frozen, they say. And we can't accumulate anymore. So we can still accumulate goodness, even once we've broken a bodhisattva vow. But somehow that the breaking of a root vow has such an effect on our mind that all those seeds that we have that we've dedicated towards seeing emptiness directly, they don't get destroyed, they just get frozen. And then it's like they're locked away in a vault. You can't add to them. I don't know where the seeds go that you're trying to add to them, but they just can't be added to, which means they're not going to grow and they're not going to ripen because they're locked away in this vault somehow. I don't really quite understand it. So it's one of those things. It's like, okay, I'll buy it because understanding seeds planted and seeds ripening, at least it's saying breaking our bodhisattva vow does not negate those seeds. It doesn't damage them. Thank goodness, right? In my logic, I would say it must just destroy all those seeds, which would be worse, right? As long as they're locked away in a vault, if we can find the way to open the vault, ta-da, right? They're back again. And that's going to be the punchline. We can open the vault again. But it's really serious to get them locked away in the vault, right? Because they can't grow when they're locked away. They can't be added to. So Lama says, so it's not really so advantageous to feel like, oh, well, I can be lackadaisical about my vows because I can always retake the ceremony and strengthen them when I need them strengthened. That when we unlock the vault, right, that goodness does start to grow again, but the vows themselves are never quite like they were when we first took them. So this second serious negative result is that the seeds get blocked, and even if we renew our vows and so open the vault again, that the power of the vows is not as strong as it was. And then the third negative result is that breaking our vows makes it really difficult to find spiritual teachers in the future. So keep in mind that when we're speaking about future in regards to bodhisattva vows, we're talking about any future, not just this lifetime future. It does mean this lifetime future. But our bodhisattva vows stay in our mind through lifetimes. So the good news is, to fully break a root downfall, we need these very specific 4 attitudes in our mind as we do the deed, and technically any time afterwards, in order to fully break these vows. So if we understand these 4 attitudes well, we can understand better how to protect our vows by having or avoiding those 4 attitudes according to the situation. If we don't have in mind just any one of these 4 as we are doing the deed that we're doing, then we don't break the vow. We damage it, of course, and we'll reap negative karma, plant negative karma as a result. But it takes all 4 to break a vow. And so these 4 are called kuntishi. Where's my share? I don't quite have everybody, but. Okay, here's the Tibetan for these four chains. They're called the four chains. Kunti shi. It's Tri. It sounds like it should be Kuntri shi. But if you listen carefully, when Geshe-la says it's Kunti shi. The R is in there somehow, but it sounds like Tyi. Kunti shi. Shi is the number 4. The Kunti, the T part, has this connotation of a vine that wraps around the little sapling tree, and uses the tree as its support system and eventually chokes off the tree. So it's this idea that we have certain thoughts and motivations that are mistaken and selfish, and we justify them, and they wrap around our mind and chokes off its goodness, chokes off its ability to make a wise decision. The Kunti Shi is that these 4 specific states of mind that are twisted around our bodhisattva attempts and chokes off our ability to make decisions based on our vows. Therefore, wrong states of mind, mistaken states of mind that we don't think are mistaken, or we wouldn't have them, right? We wouldn't allow them to go on. So really, they're not any different than mental afflictions, nyomong. They are mental afflictions. But when they call them the 4 chains, it's in this context of these are the 4 mental afflictions in mind through which we break our bodhisattva vows, our root vows, mainly. So Kunti Shi is specific to the bodhisattva vows. However, the term Kunti chains is used in other contexts as well. And for instance, in the Abhidharma Kosha talks about the chains in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9. There are 9 main chains, but not related to the bodhisattva vows, just related to being a human in samsara. So there are 9 chains. One of them is the lack of a sense of shame. We'll see that one again, meaning not having enough self-respect to avoid a deed that would harm another. Second one, a lack of sense of consideration, meaning concern for how my deed will affect somebody else if they knew about it, out of the doing a wrong deed out of jealousy. The jealousy is the chain, right? The mental affliction that's wrapped around our ability to make a wise decision. Out of stinginess, the chain of stinginess, the chain of wild desire, the chain of regret, which is funny. Usually regret is said to be an unpleasant emotion that's a virtue. So I'm not quite sure how this one fits for Abhidharma. And then the chain of dullness and drowsiness. So we're just not alert enough to make a wise decision. And out of outright anger, the chain of anger, and the chain of wanting to conceal our faults. So choosing our behavior based on that. So the 4 chains, specifically in relation to our bodhisattva vows, go like this. Number one, the first chain is to not consider what we have done or are about to do as something that is wrong. Jetson Kappa says this applies from the point of planning the deed, through doing the deed, through thinking about it afterwards, for forever. Which that part starts to get confusing. So he says, if then anywhere along the line you stop and think, well, like maybe criticizing that other teacher isn't really the best thing for me to do. But then you go on and do it anyway. We'll see how that influences our awareness of ourselves doing the criticism in terms of whether it fully breaks the vow or not. He says this little bit of doubt about our actions, it is protective of our vows. When we have no doubt at all, this is the right thing to do. That's that state of mind, when it's a deed that is not the vow, right? It is the deed that the vow is talking about avoiding. That factor in our mind plays a big part in the power of the imprint. So, let's just take the first one, praising myself and criticizing another. And we learned it was in this sort of specific to Mahayana Dharma teachers, and the one that's either praising self or criticizing the other is feeling that other looks like better than me, they're getting more support than me, they have more students than me, and out of that, right, we hear them say something that we don't think is quite right. And then we glom onto that. And it's like, oh, it grows in our mind into, oh, they're teaching their students wrongly, I have to correct them, right? But deep down, it's that, no, I want their students, I want their possessions, I want their reputation. So this mental affliction's wrapped around my mind, and it's making me justify needing to criticize them because I've heard them say something that I believe is wrong. And rather than checking it out with them together in private for me to learn something new or help them see if they really did say something wrong, we use it to justify showing in public that, they're not as good a teacher as me. Do you see how ugly it could get? And you could be very easily saying, no, but they're teaching wrongly, when deep down it's like, no, I want what they have. So we can fall into these states easier than we might think if we're not checking, making honest decisions about our actions and reactions, rather than letting our decisions be on automatic pilot. So this piece is the piece where you don't think that what you're doing is a wrong thing, which means you don't think it pertains to your bodhisattva vows, or you don't see how it does. So it's of the four, it's the strongest negativity, is to think some behavior that does fall within our Bodhisattva vows guidelines is not wrong to do. Right? Yes, Ola.
Thank you for teaching. Concerning this chain, so if we think before that it's wrong, but then we do it, or if we think about that afterwards, it still is not breaking the chain.
We're getting there.
Okay.
We're getting there. We're going to go through all these ramifications. Okay. So Lama Tsongkhapa says this belief that what you did is not wrong, in order for this first chain to do its thing, that belief it's not wrong has to be from the very beginning of planning, through doing, through remembering, until you don't have the memory anymore, for forever. Which means that if ever we think back and we go, oh my gosh, that was stupid, that was wrong, that was mistaken, the scripture says you didn't break your vow after all. And it's like, this drives me nuts. So I locked everything away in the vault for I don't know how long. And then I do this life review, which you haven't done one, do it soon. And whoa, man, what a mistake that was. Whoa, man, what a mistake that was. And that honest, healthy regret, you didn't break your vows in the first place all of a sudden. I don't quite get it. So then do you need to renew your vows or don't you? And do they restore to the full beauty or don't they? So I don't know the answers, right, to those details. But it's curious. It has to do with this thing called time and the emptiness of time, right? So thank goodness the scripture points that out to us, because otherwise we go, oh my gosh, I did do that deed since I've had my Bodhisattva vows, and oh my gosh, I didn't even realize I'd broken my vows, and they've been broken all this time, and egads, I'm such a jerk, I might as well give up. Do you see where it could go? Oops, foot number 18 broken. So I think all of this is designed for our success, not designed for our failure. And it's helpful to keep that in mind when we're hearing all these, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. It's to help us, not to, be the boss. So any moment of regret is powerfully protective. And we've heard that before. And now we're understanding it a little bit better. So Geshe gave a classic monastic example of this. No, wait, I know, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. So second factor, first factor is you don't consider it to be wrong. Second factor is you are willing to do it again, which makes sense. If criticizing that other teacher is not wrong to do, it's right to do. And regardless of the apparent effect you get, you're willing to do it again because you believe it was necessary to protect those students from a teacher who was teaching wrongly, when deep down your motivation was to get their students for yourself, right? Ugly motivation. And maybe it worked and maybe it didn't, that doesn't matter. But when you think back on the situation, it's like, yeah, I will do that again. Right? So the yes, I will do it again factor is actually independent We can have that state of mind independent of whether we think our deed was right or wrong. And sometimes there are even wrong deeds that we can't help ourselves from doing, and that as we're doing it, even after we're doing it, we know, I'm going to end up doing this again. Like knowing you're going to do it again is a little different than willing to do it again. They call this willing to do it again, as if you intend to do it again. But even this knowing it's going to happen again and you will act like that again is this negative influence that is a chain, right? It keeps us locked into the willingness to do it again, right? The seed is planted, the situation comes up, we're good, right? The likelihood of doing it again just keeps getting fed. So again, this willing to do it again or intending needs to be in the planning, in the doing, in the after, thinking about it afterwards for forever. So similar to the first one, if at some point you rethink and go, oh, wait, that wasn't right. I don't want to do that again. Even if I know I might, I really don't want to. I am going to try. I'm going to struggle, right? That's protective. That somehow unbreaks the vow. So this is where he gave a classical monastic example where he says, this monk is overwhelmed by sexual desire and knows they're going to break their code of conduct, but they know they won't be able to restrain themselves. And they know it's wrong, even as they're doing it. They know they're breaking their vow, even as they're doing it. And as a result, they don't actually break the vow. Whoa, that seems dangerous, doesn't it? They don't break the vow. Do they plant negative seeds? Yes. Are those negative seeds likely to grow into actually doing something that does break their vows? Probably. Right? So it's not like we can justify, well, I know it's wrong, but I'm going to do it anyway. That it does protect the vow as long as there's some level of struggle during the overwhelm. But when we've learned we do a deed overwhelmed by mental afflictions, it's the seed planted isn't quite so negative as a deed, the same deed done with a clear decision, clear-minded decision to do it directly, like to harm somebody, mentally afflicted. The seed of harming is not quite so bad. You would think it would be worse, right? You are planting the seeds of the mental affliction, and that's worse. But the actual deed done is less bad than if it's coldly, calculatedly, enjoyably done. And you can kind of see the difference. So here as well, that when we're overwhelmed by mental afflictions and do a deed that we know is wrong, yes, we get negative karma. Yes, we damage the power of our vows, but because of the knowing it's not what you would do if you had any better self-control, is protective of the vow. Negative karma, of course, but doesn't break the vow. So our struggle is a great goodness. Third chain is that we enjoy doing it. We're satisfied with having done it. We enjoyed it as we did it. When we think back about it, we're satisfied, right? We recall the enjoyment. It's it's a little bit like rejoicing in that deed. Well, if you didn't think it was wrong, why wouldn't you rejoice in it? Right? You can see how these are all vines twisting in our mind. Mhm. So if, we're using this scenario of one Mahayana teacher criticizing another that's really motivated by their own wanting to get that other's students and reputation. If I'm aware that I'm overcome with this negative emotion, and I know it's a wrong thing to do, and I do it anyway, but I feel badly about doing it. Right? I'm not enjoying doing it, but I still do it. I don't break the vow. Do I make lots of different kinds of negative karma? Yes. But I didn't break my vow. So it's like, if I didn't think it was wrong, why wouldn't I do it and enjoy doing it and be glad I had done it? Right? If it was the right thing to do. So this would be the state of mind that would have this intact chain adding, right? It's the third of the four. It's adding to the other two. So again, any level of regret helps us protect our vows. And again, the scripture says this holds for while we're doing it and any time afterwards. There are verses that we use to trigger our understandings of things, and in the 7-limb prayer, don't we say, like, I make offerings, both set out and imagined. I confess my wrong deeds from all time and rejoice in the virtues of all. And it's just like, okay, catch all confession. But in a sense, just to hear ourselves saying that, understanding what we mean by it, helps us protect, right, all of our vowed behaviors. And it's like, how can that possibly be? Certainly, I need to go through them one by one. And yes, we would want to go through each one and confess with the 4 powers. We'll talk about it later. But just to say, man, I regret every ignorant thing I've ever done. Like, that one seed covers every seed. It's really magical when we start to get it. It's like, this path shouldn't be so hard if we really understood. Seems hard to me anyway. Okay, number 4 is notsa and trelia. I think we're getting familiar with these 2 words, are we? We've heard them before. We'll hear them again and again and again. Notsa, the word literally means shame. Shame, has this real negative connotation in modern society. I'm ashamed of myself. I don't want anybody to know. I'm ashamed of myself, so I'm no good. I can't do anything right. But, it holds us down. It really would be a chain in that regard. Here it's being used as a positive state of mind. So shame doesn't quite cut it for me. Notsa here is this sense of self-conscientiousness, maybe even self-esteem might be better. But this is the state of mind that says to ourselves, I will avoid doing that deed, even if nobody else ever knew about it. If I'm the only one aware of my behavior, I hold myself in such high regard that I'm better than that, right? So I will not let myself do that. So in our scenario of, me criticizing that other teacher, it's like, no, I'm better than that. I don't need that reputation. I don't need those students. I don't, right? I can, right? It's me. It's up to me. I don't need to put them down to try and grow my reputation. Nobody has to know. If nobody knew that I was criticizing them, would I still criticize? You see, we're always there watching. So you be your own judge, regardless of what anybody else thinks. That healthy sense of self-conscientiousness is notza. This chain is to not have that. If we don't have a healthy sense of self-esteem, then we don't pick and choose our behaviors according to the impact it will have on our own future. We pick and choose our behaviors based on what we want to do or how we please others, or so this chain is to not have notsa or trelyu. Trelyu is this state of mind that helps us avoid a harmful deed because of the impact that being aware of us doing that deed would have on somebody else. Not meaning the impact of the negative deed on the person that we do it to, but meaning anybody else who sees me do that deed, how it would impact them. So for instance, if I had my own students and they see me criticizing this other teacher, unabashedly, they're going to get the impression that that's right to do. And then they're going to do it. And, if I'm not thinking it's wrong, I'm enjoying doing it, right? Of course, they're going to follow me. And then in the end, right, I've damaged those students by giving them the wrong example to follow. So suppose, it's not students and it's just other people in general, seeing one teacher criticize another teacher. My concern for those other people in general going, well, look at those two Buddhist teachers going head to head, I don't want any part of that. To care that my behavior could influence somebody in that way, in a negative way, right, is a healthy state of mind, right? In modern psychology, they go, no, that means you're a people pleaser and, you're going to hurt yourself. And I see where they're going with that. I'm not negating that at all. From these perspectives, we are influencing others in obvious and subtle ways. And to care about that influence that we might have is this healthy state of trelya, right? They call it consideration. So conscience and consideration are the two more modern translations that we see for these. But even those two words don't quite get it right. So it's worth taking the time to work out in your own mind, what does my notsa feel like? How strong is it? Right? How high, what's the bar that I hold myself to? And then, how do I push it a little higher? And what's the level of my trelya? Do I just care about what people think about me? right? That's one level, and that's good enough. That if we avoid doing a wrong deed because we care what our mother will say about us, will think about us, and so we don't do that wrong deed, great. That was the point of Trellia. But it can go much beyond just what somebody thinks about us. It can go to influencing their behavior, influencing their thought process, influencing whether they get on their spiritual path or not. Okay? So this chain is to not have that. It's called trauma, to not have the concern about the influence we have on other people. And so I'll do whatever deed I want to. Thank you very much. Doesn't matter how it impacts anybody else. I'll do whatever I want, says no notsa me. And I'll do whatever I want, regardless of other people knowing about it. Trail you may. That's what would allow, that's the fourth chain. Right. So we'll see how they all come together. I've gone 6 minutes past our break time. So I'm going to shut up, stop share, pause recording, get refreshed, pause recording. Let's be back. All right, so those four chains, not to think the thing is wrong, to do it with pleasure or in gladness, to be willing to do it again, to have no shame or consideration. Let's call it conscientiousness or consideration for others. Those are the four chains. And to have those four chains from the planning to the doing, to the aftermath, to the forever after, is the factors that breaks the vow. And I don't know, could we say keeps the vows broken? Maybe. Because if at any point we go, oh my gosh, that was a bad influence on others, or oh my gosh, I don't want to do that again, or oh my gosh, that was not fun, or oh my gosh, maybe that wasn't the best thing to do, like any one of those, and the four chains are not there anymore, and then the vow's not broken anymore. So this all applies to 16 of those 18 root Bodhisattva vows. Those two, number 9, number 18, holding wrong views, giving up the wish. You don't have those four in mind when you do those two. Number 18, giving up the wish, happens like that. The number 9, holding wrong view, takes some time. So you could make the case that number 9 does have to have those four, because you have to be thinking that you're thinking about karma and emptiness, past and future lives, is right. I don't know. They don't need all four chains. It doesn't need all four chains. And yet it seems like you have all four chains when you come to that conclusion. And maybe that's it is how it is that number 9 is so serious. Okay. So if we do the deeds of any of these other 16, but without those four chains twisted around our mind, then that is what it is to break the secondary vows. And we'll see how the secondary vows like come out of the root vows directed towards our 6 perfections. So it is true that without all four of the chains, we don't break our bodhisattva vow, the root vow. We would have broken the secondary vows that relate to it. So again, it's like this, I feel my like emotion swing to, oh, wow, my vows are protected, to, oh, but not the secondary ones, but oh, I can protect those easier. And right, it's like I'm encouraged and then I'm discouraged, and then I'm encouraged and then I'm discouraged. But overall, right, as you do your homework, as you chew on these ideas, I hope you'll come to this middle way balance. Is like, yes, I can do this. Again, because these are designed for our success, not our failure. So keep that in mind, please, as you study. There's a prayer practice that I was given years ago, and part of it is to recite your 18 bodhisattva vows. And at the end of that, it says, 16 of these I can only do with all four chains. Not to think the thing is wrong, not to want to stop it, to do it with pleasure and gladness, with no shame for myself or consideration for others. 2, though, I can do without there being all four, holding views that are wrong and abandoning the wish. And it was through that verse that helped me keep these four chains in mind, like really internalize them on the protective level and on the damaging level, to understand them. So when we are reviewing our vows, here's my vow number 1, praising myself, criticizing others. And, I kept that vow because I'm not interacting with other Dharma teachers. I don't know what they're teaching, right? I haven't criticized. And so I haven't praised myself other. Yeah, I kept my vow. But we would also want to be looking at, how are my 4 chains doing here? If I had been in a situation, might I have criticized? No, remembering it's like our mind may criticize in an instant, but it's what comes out of our mouth that damages the vow. So don't beat yourself up if you're comparing yourself to other people. We do it automatically. It's a mammalian safety feature. Are they dangerous? Are they safe? Are they somebody I need to help? Are they somebody who needs to help me? Right? We're always doing this comparison. So when it pops into our mind, we catch it and go, okay, mammal speaking, Bodhisattva says, can I help you? Yeah. So when we're checking our vows, checking our behavior, kind of run your mind through these 4 as well to help habituate to them. And Geshe-la was saying to his group of students, find a way to track your behavior. If we want to change, we need to keep track of our efforts. And the tracking isn't about how well I did, how poorly I did. It's just the tracking. It's more like counting. And so find a way that every couple of hours you can make yourself stop and just look back at the last couple of hours. And then we have the book, right, as a method, a tool for doing that, so that you already have pre-planned what it is you're going to check for the last 2 hours. And then you can look ahead and say, well, what am I going to focus on for the next 2 hours? He said, if you're having trouble stopping what you're doing because you're involved with other people, you can always say, oh, excuse me, I have to go to the bathroom. Nobody's going to say, no, you can't go. You have to wait, hold it. They'll go, okay, fine, right? You go away, you come back 10, 15 minutes later, you can re-engage with them. Yes, did you have to go to the bathroom? Yes, you had to go to do your book, right? You're not lying. Whether you actually went to the bathroom or not, that's up to you. But do you see, he says, find a way. And nowadays we've got our phone, it has an alarm. I'm talking to myself as well. I go in and out of stopping every 2 hours and other times just thinking I'm watching all the time, which mostly I am, but he says there's no excuse not to be tracking our behavior. And that especially when we're first learning about these vows and we have a little bit of excitement and eagerness, that's the time to institute a new behavior, right? A new way of being. Because if we wait until we hear about it again, our mind goes, yeah, I've heard that, right? And we don't act on it. So he was trying to encourage us. He went further to say, this is the ticket to reaching all of your goals, which we said was, I want to reach my total enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And the longer it takes us, the more suffering goes on in our world, both our own and others. So what are you waiting for? I find that kind of pressure hard, not so encouraging. But if it works for you, use it. Keeping track of our behavior is a necessary tool. So what do we do if we do, oh my gosh, find that we've broken a root downfall, that we had these 4 chains intact, we did do one of those deeds, and we realize it, what do we have to do? So that event of doing one of those 16 behaviors with all 4 chains intact is called planting a big impurity. A big impurity. And that seeds wipes out all of our vows. So that seed, in order to, how do I describe this? In order to so that seed would, I'm having a senior moment, I guess. I can't get it out of my mouth. This big impurity would make it such that our wish to reach total enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, must be squashed. And it wouldn't really probably even occur to us that, oh my gosh, I broke my bodhisattva vows, right? Something would have to happen that we would go, oh my gosh, I thought I had my bodhisattva vows, but now I realize I don't. And we would need to retake our bodhisattva vows from a qualified master, hopefully the same one who gave them to us the first time. So we would have to have our munsem back again in order to renew the vows. So like grossly, we get so mentally afflicted, we do a deed that breaks the vow, and our mind is so overcome, like we just completely have fallen off the path, which could happen. But then something happens and our wish grows back again a little bit, and we would go back to a teacher and say, I really, really do want to reach Buddhahood, and I regret that mistake, and blah, blah, blah. But say that our broken vow, we realize it really soon. And we go, oh my gosh, I did have the 4 chains. And now I realize I did, and I really regret it, which means all of a sudden you don't have the 4 chains. We would still want to go work, like renew our wish to reach total enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, and go and redo our Bodhisattva vow ceremony, our declaration before all the Buddhas. Right? So for a full-on break, even though by the time we realize it and we regret it, they're not broken anymore. To restore them, we go retake the ceremony, ideally from the same teacher, but if they're not available, from someone else. And the vows are restored, but not to their former glory. So all of a sudden it's like, wait, that's a little bit contradictory. But we can see how, having made the mistake and regretted it, that it's not like it wipes out that we did it, but we can unlock the vault again and start adding to, but not to the extent that we will be able to ripen the direct perception of emptiness in that lifetime, right? Not ever, but just in that lifetime. So the moral to that story was, if we do a full-on break, we need to retake the ceremony. So what happens if we don't have all 4 chains? Like some combination, that's where Ola went early in her question. Well, what happens, right? What's the combinations? And how do we fix a deed done that didn't have all 4 chains, but I did do the deed? So there's 2 other levels. We have the big impurity, all 4 chains intact. There's a medium impurity. And that's where we do any one of those 16, not thinking it was wrong, but with 1 or 2 of the other 4 present. So if we're not thinking it's wrong, that's chain number 1. If we have all other 3 intact, it's a big impurity, not a medium impurity. If we don't think it's wrong and we're willing to do it again, and we enjoyed doing it, or we had no shame or consideration, or we had, right, any combination of 2, but not all 4. Are you following me? We do a medium impurity. We have done a medium impurity. To repair a medium impurity damage to our 16 root vows, we gather together 3 people who would understand our confession. And I think we heard before, it's helpful if there are people who have bodhisattva vows, people who are on the path, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. It could be anyone who, knows the language you're speaking in and is willing to hear you and hear your confession, and they won't judge you, they won't tell you what to do, they won't correct you, right? So your confession buddies are, that's an important relationship. And it means you as a confession buddy, your job is to just allow them to download and then throw it in the fire, right? Your job as the confession buddy is not to remember every confession they ever made to you. And it's not to judge whether they're good or bad. It's to just allow them to hear themselves telling somebody else. And then you just let it go right through you, right? And into the purification fire and love them all the more. Right? No advice, no correction, unless they ask, what do you think I should do? Right? Then feel free. But that's different than confession. And so when you're looking for a confession person, right, you want to know that that person, right, will be that for you. So you would want to train them, right? Tell them, okay, this is your job. Just listen. Yeah. And then, of course, we also need to have it be confidential. Probably that should be number one event. You, the one being confessed to, totally confidential, of course, what they say. You know, the advantage of letting it go through and throwing it out is you just forget it. And when you forget it, there's no, right, you don't have to worry about telling somebody else about it, but be sure that we don't. And then the one we confess to, we also want to make clear this will all be confidential, right? So that we feel more open and safe to share what's in our heart. It's hard, actually, to both confess and be the one confessed to. We should do a whole class on that, come to think of it. Okay, so you just tell them, right? This is what I did. Here's my bodhisattva vow. You do a 4 powers with them listening, basically. Then a small impurity is any one of those 16 deeds where you know it was wrong. You know it is wrong. So that means you don't have the first of the 4 chains in town already. But you do the deed, enjoying it, willing to do it again with no shame or consideration or any combination, right? It could be just one. I enjoyed doing it. I had shame and consideration. I don't intend to do it again. I know it was wrong, but you know, it was kind of fun. Deed damaged, vow damaged in this small impurity. So any combination of the 3 in the event that you know the deed is not, you know the deed is wrong. It's like, if you know the deed is wrong, why would you do any of these? But we do, right? Driven by seeds, driven by habit, driven by mental afflictions, we do deeds that we know are going to come back to hurt us, and we do it anyway. And we're not bad, we're just mistaken. We're creatures of habit. And this is a tool for recognizing the moments when we do that. And then, oops, right, I regret. So the way we fix a small impurity is that we confess it to just one person who would understand. So now, in order for our confession to be effective, we need to have those four other attitudes, which is the 4 powers of purification. The 4 R's, they're called sometimes: refuge, regret, remedy, and restraint. Sometimes regret, refuge, remedy, restraint. Sometimes, you know, the first 2 are often switched and the second 2 are often switched, but regardless, you have all 4 considerations in your mind as you ask your person who's hearing you, as you talk yourself through those. I did this deed. I regret it because karmic seeds planted are going to come back as blah, blah, blah. You just talk yourself through and include your understanding of emptiness and karma, include your admiration and gratitude for Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Feel your regret. Admit the regret, admit the deed. Don't go off on why, right? Just the circumstance, and this is what I did, and these seeds will come back to hurt me and others, and that's the antithesis of what I say I want to become, and so I deeply regret it, and my antidote is partly this confession, and I will state what you're going to do as your antidote, and I will state what you're going to do as your power of restraint, something that you can actually achieve, so that when you do it, you go, ah, right? Purification done. So our basis force is recalling our refuge, recommitting ourselves to our bodhicitta, our wish to reach our total Buddhahood, our recommitting our intention to reach the direct perception of emptiness so that we can help others in that deep and ultimate way. Recommit to being guided by those who live by this truth. I mean, everybody lives by it, but intentionally, right? Lives by it knowingly. The Buddhas, that which they know, that which they share, and the Sangha, those who are walking around with us, who are ahead of us on the path, particularly those who have seen emptiness directly. So we are reasserting our foundation of our understanding the marriage of karma, meaning behavior, and the empty nature of all existence as being the tool through which we create a pure world for everyone. Our refuge is the foundation that we push ourselves up from when we have fallen down. No, if we fall down in a body of water, you can't push yourself up to stand on the surface of the water. When we fall down on solid land, we can push ourselves up and stand up. So our solid land is our refuge, and our refuge is our belief in karma and emptiness that's shown to us by Buddhas, taught to us by Sangha. Right? The regret is the destruction force. And His Holiness calls it the intelligent regret of an educated Buddhist. The intelligent regret of a spiritually educated anybody. Meaning cold, logical understanding of what a serious boo-boo we did. Serious because its result will be suffering for me and suffering for others. Right? Not, oh, I'm so bad, see again, I can't do anything right. But rather just, darn, out of selfish habit, I did something that will come back to hurt me. It's like, how selfish is that? To only care about what will come back to hurt me. But that's how we know whether a deed is a kindness or not a kindness, is by assessing. If somebody does this to me, will it be pleasant or will it be unpleasant? And we can see that there are circumstances that seem unpleasant that we would want somebody to do. But before we do that to somebody else, we would want to be sure that they would see it that way. Very, very slippery, but so powerful when we get this glimpse of having this state of mind that's going, what I'm doing is going to come back. What I'm doing is going to come back. And so using that to judge whether I use it, whether I do what my impulse is wanting me to do based on that. Okay. So to have regret means to recognize what I've done. When it comes back to me, it will be unpleasant, and my reaction to that unpleasantness will likely make more unpleasantness for the future. Darn, I just added to, right? Everybody's suffering. I just added to the big mistake in the world, regret. I like the explanation of regret from the story of the two guys that rush into the bar. You know, they're hot, they're in a rush, and they stop in the bar for a refreshment before they go on their way. And they rush into the bar, and the barkeep sees that they're in a rush. And he goes, "What do you have?" And then they go, "Oh, that." So in his rush, he grabs the bottle they point to, pours it into the two glasses. They go, click, salute, down the hatch. An instant later, the first guy has a seizure, falls over dead. Sorry, there's three guys. First guy falls over dead. The other two guys are going, oh. The second guy seizes, drops over dead. The third guy has regret. That's regret. I shouldn't have drunk that. Bunk. That's the feeling and swiftness of this sense of regret that they're trying to convey. Bad result coming to me. Yeah, regret. And to have that healthy sense of regret is protective. It's a good seed. It's a negative feeling because it's like, I can't do anything right, which ignorantly I can't, can I? If every deed I do is stained with the belief that the me doing it has my own nature, the them I'm doing it to has their own nature, and the what I'm doing has its own nature of bringing about the result that I'm intending in the next moment, then everything I'm doing is mistaken. And if I use that, if I do something where I see it's unkind to another person, knowing it's unkind because if somebody did it to me, it would be uncomfortable, right? Unpleasant for me. And I go ahead and do it anyway, realizing I've done it anyway. I'm like the third guy in the bar. That regret is actually protective. It's a negative feeling. I did wrong. But the sooner we have it, the more it influences the seeds that were planted as we did the deed. So somewhere along the line, Geshe-la was explaining, a seed is collected, and it takes a certain amount of time for that collected seed to harden. He calls it harden. And that in that period of time, while it's hardening, it is influenceable by our following states of mind. So when we do a deed and we're happy we did it, right, it's more strongly strengthened, hardened. If we do a deed and we regret doing it, the negativity of the regret damages the seed and makes it harder or longer or not even able to harden into a seed. So this healthy sense of regret, not just blanket regret, but as we're doing a deed, Is my wisdom strong enough? Is my bodhicitta strong? How am I being harmful here? Can I do better? All of those states of mind, although they sound self-critical, are this regret for our ignorance that lessens the strength of the ignorance that's being planted with every deed that we do, right? So regret is the only unpleasant state of mind that's a virtue, is what they say. They call it a negative state of mind that's a virtue. And this is why, because the regret is for our ignorance, our regret is for our mistake. It's like a double negative, right? And it's gonna help damage that negativity. The restraint force is like necessary. Of all the forces, they say the regret is the destruction, but the restraint is the power, because we can regret all we want, but if we go and plant those seeds again and again and again, by not restraining ourselves from repeating it, then we don't damage the seed, and we plant the seeds for lying to ourselves, because we said, I regret that deed, I'll never do it again, and we turn around and we do it. So the power of restraint is the power underneath the four powers. The regret is the power, it's how we destroy it. You see, it's like you could do this debate, what's the most important of the four powers? And you can make a case for any one of the four being the most important. So they tell us, we've heard, when you do your power of restraint, when you establish it as something that you can actually achieve. You know, you're confessing, having yelled back to the angry boss, and you say, look, I know better, I'm never going to do it again. And then you turn around and, 3 days later, you're yelling back at the angry boss. As opposed to very specific, I'm confessing, yelling back to the angry boss. And so where I'm going to do my power of restraint is when next time my kids are jumping on the bed, instead of yelling at them, I'm going to, I don't know, come up with something, get on the bed and jump with them. Or, children, I love you so much, I'm making cookies, let's go, right? Distract them, whatever you're going to do. Plan it out. And in a way that you know that you can actually do it. And then watch for the opportunities to do it, to not yell back, to not react in that way. And then when you don't react in that way, when you actually do your power of restraint, note it. Like, yay, I did my power of restraint. And then that leads, of course, to your rejoicing practice, which comes after. So our fourth power of our purification is the antidote force, where we do something that we make up for the wrong deed. So we learned that list of things that serve as an antidote force. And we can add one more to that list, which is do the opposite. So we can do both. We can establish, as my antidote to the yelling at the boss, I'm going to meditate on the emptiness of me and my anger for 3 days. I'm going to do 5 minutes a day on the emptiness of me, the emptiness of the boss, the emptiness of the situation. And that's going to be my antidote to that instant of yelling at the boss. Or we can, say I'm going to read the Diamond Cutter Sutra, right? Spend 2 hours doing that as my antidote force. You decide. I'm going to do 20,000 money mantras as my antidote force. And we can do our antidote force in terms of do the opposite for others. So what would be the opposite of yelling back at the boss? On one level, it's like not yell back at anybody. But the opposite really would be the boss is yelling at me because, I don't know, so there's something going wrong in their life, and this is how they react to it. And they seem to think it's effective. It's not. What would be a nicer way? How would be a nicer way to communicate that there's a problem and we need to fix it? I will communicate like that in my family, or with my team at work, or with the people at the grocery store. Be the opposite of the angry yelling boss in your other world, beyond angry yelling boss, as the antidote to the angry yelling boss, right? It's actually it feels more connected, doesn't it, than reading Diamond Cutter Sutra to stop yelling bosses. Technically, Diamond Cutter Sutra is probably more potent in stopping yelling bosses. But there's this disconnect in our own mind. We don't really believe it. In which case, it wouldn't be more effective until we saw that, oh my gosh, it really did make a difference. Whereas being the opposite of yelling boss in my outer world seems more effective because we're actually changing our behavior. And we're planting different seeds than the way we were before, based on a bad experience that we were having that showed us how to act differently. And so both methods are useful antidote forces. We do need to do a makeup activity. Sometimes you just need to do it once and it's done. Most of the times it takes learning a new habit or committing ourselves to something that lasts long enough to take care of strong seeds that would otherwise be hard to antidote. And the example I think we've heard before is Ken Rinpoche was looking after the families in that community. And one of those families had its son who went off to fight in the Vietnam War. And he came back and he confessed to Rinpoche. He said, I was a guerrilla in the jungle and I just shot my machine gun randomly in the jungle with the intention of killing the enemy. So I don't know if I killed anybody or not, but I must have, right? I mean, that was my job. And he goes, what do I do to purify that? And Rinpoche knew that his father kept sheep to kill for mutton. And he said to the young man, he said, buy those sheep from your father and tend to them, care for them until they die natural lives. And apparently sheep live 15 years or so. So the young man did this and he kept those sheep and took care of them until they died a natural death. And it was protecting life. Oh, every day, right? He took care of those sheep. And it was that over and over and over again, intentionally protecting two lives that was determined by Rinpoche to be the antidote force for this person. Right now, no doubt he was also given a power of restraint. Don't go to war again. But then also, don't kill less in your everyday life as well. And, I don't know the specifics past that, but the example was sometimes our antidote force can take our whole lifetime to complete, right? Or somebody's whole lifetime. Studying emptiness is the most powerful antidote force, because the better we understand the empty nature of others' experiences and ourselves, the better we see the connection between what we see ourselves thinking, doing, and saying towards those others is what creates the circumstances of our own personal experiences in the future. And so if we want a pure, exquisite, happy, beautiful world full of happy, wonderful people, beings, we would want to create the circumstances for that by being that for others to the extent that we can, even before we see others in that way. Did that come through? We want to be what we want to see in the world. If things are the way they appear to be in them, from them, independent of our behavior, then there's nothing that we can do to improve the situation. There's nothing that we can do to do anything but perpetuate the world in the way we know it. If things lack their own natures, the nature they seem to have must be unique to the one who's seeing them that way. And that must be a result, and results need causes. And the causes have to be from some way in which we imprinted in our own mind the cause for that result. Right? It's like this circular argument, beautifully spiraling. A spiral kind of going like this, getting bigger and bigger, not smaller and smaller. It shows us that it's the power of our own interaction with others that is our personal power, right? Our power of creation is in our interaction with other beings, is the moral to the story. And coming to experience emptiness directly gives us this personal realization through which we will never misunderstand again. We will misunderstand things, but we will know that we are incorrect in our misunderstanding. So I need to draw 5 more minutes from my minute bank, please. The Arya Asanga, he says, well, then actually there's 2 ways to lose our bodhisattva vows. One is to break a root vow. The other is to go to the Lama who gave it to you and formally give them back. We can do that, should the need arise. But then if we examine the vows carefully, says Geshe Michael, we see, and Jesugapa, we see that there are 3 ways that bodhisattva vows can be lost. One is we break the vow with the 4 chains intact for the 16 or the 2 in those other ways. Number 2, we hold wrong view. Right? So if we had right view, and at some point we had right view enough to take the vows, and at some point, I don't know, something happens and our karma shifts and we reevaluate and we come to the new conclusion that nope, karmic laws don't make sense. No such thing past future lives. Right? So 16 with the 4 chains intact, or come to hold different views. They call it wrong views, but you don't think it's wrong anymore, right? It's right for you. And third, you give up your bodhicitta. Either formally, you go back to the Lama, I just can't do it. I can't handle it, right? I don't intend to live this life anymore. Or in a fit of a mental affliction, if they're going to be like that, I don't want to do it. Okay. So really, it seems like 4 ways. to lose our bodhisattva vows. Bodhisattva vows are not lost by dying and moving on. Pratimoksha vows end. Bodhisattva vows do not. Okay. Technically, that was only 2 minutes. So remember that person we wanted to be able to help? We've learned a lot. We've been given a lot to consider that we will use sooner or later to help that other in this deep and ultimate way. And that's an extraordinary goodness. So please be happy with yourself. And think of this goodness like a beautiful glowing gemstone that you can hold in your hands. Recall your own precious holy guide. See how happy they are with you. Feel your gratitude to them, your reliance upon them. Ask them to please stay close, to continue to guide you, help you, inspire you. And then offer them this gemstone of goodness. See them accept it and bless it. And they carry it with them right back into your heart. See them there, feel them there. Their love, their compassion, their wisdom. It feels so good, we want to keep it forever. And so we know to share it. By the power of the goodness that we've just done, may all beings complete the collection of merit and wisdom, and thus gain the true ultimate bodies that merit and wisdom make. So use those 3 long exhales to share this goodness with that one person, to share it with everyone you love, to share it with every existing being everywhere. See them all filled with loving kindness. Filled with the wish to be helpful and kind. And may it be so. Okay, thank you so much.